excited to follow your presentation, Henry. That was very interesting. So I want to just talk a little bit about myself so you guys know who I am. I'm a long-time cannabis patient, essentially to relieve symptoms of my autoimmune disorder, which at the time that I started some 30 years ago, I had no idea that's why I was doing it. But now that I know a lot more about medicine, I realize why I'm doing it. And like many of you, I'm learning every single day, and I have a very, very strong passion for learning. So teach me, I'm here to learn. I have a doctorate in engineering systems from MIT, and what that means is essentially it's a combination of sustainable emerging technologies, environmental policy, business and management, and human behaviors. So individual psychology and social science. So I'm looking at every challenge or every project from a systematic viewpoint. How does one thing affect the other? For instance, how have pesticides affected human health and the environment, and looking at that systematically. So that's very important to me and our company. We're a wellness and sustainability company, and I'm lucky enough that our mission to get the most healthy, cleanest plant-based food and medicine out to people aligns with my passions. So I mean, that's obviously not a mistake. Nature, number one, build large-scale sustainability and wellness movements. We've done this in 21 cities across the US. And implementing biomimicry systems. So you might be asking, what is biomimicry? So biomimicry is essentially imitating natural biological processes or designs in engineering or projects or technologies. And so we've done this in our flagship technology. It's also important to define landraces. So landraces have developed over time in their natural environment. They have not been crossed with other varieties and other strains. And they also show higher rusticity. I just needed fewer words there. Rusticity just means more resistance to adverse conditions and more adaptable to the environment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of cannabis and how it's been evolving. And the origins of cannabis, they're not entirely known. We've heard lots of stories from the aliens sent it to it originated in the Himalayas, and merchants carried the seeds around in their travel, spreading it from Central Asia to the rest of the world. It came to the US to the Americas, not just the US, sometime in 1545, and Australia sometime in 1788. And the first breeding process was about 6,500 years ago in Mongolia. And studies do suggest that breeding was more common in China. So here, just to orient you a little bit with this, is what you see is in the wild species, you see very high genetic variability. So lots of different cannabinoids and terpenes and other nutrients inside that plant, metabolites and all kinds of things. As we start the evolutionary process of cannabis, you start to see the genetic, you start to see the genetic variety decrease a lot, and that's very important. So where we are today is a lot of homogeneous cultivars, like you see the same OG or blue XXX generic strains all over the place. So our goal is to bring back that genetic variability. So you go from the wild species to the land races, and then when those land races are brought to a different environment, like to Hawaii or California, they're called heirlooms. And it was interesting, the last reference to heirlooms. I would much rather have a sun-grown heirloom tomato than a hothouse, generic tomato cultivar. So very important as we think about this. I am messing up on this pointer. Yes. Why is this important? So one of the earliest studies that I could find pointing out the importance of land races was from 1972, where Jack Harlan was essentially sounding the alarm. And he is like, wait a minute, our germplasm base is being rapidly destroyed. And this is true both for food and cannabis. And this is important because we're starting to see the destruction of plants. Have you heard about bananas? There's essentially, bananas are about to go extinct. Sound the alarms, chocolate's next, okay? And I just really don't want to see cannabis go down this same road. And so we're going to be the first to admit that we love third eyegasm is next as much as the next strain, it's great. But when you're talking about the medical use of this plant, it's important to get back to the genetic variability. So we even read just this week the first publicly announced genetically modified cannabis plant, and that concerns me. If we're going to follow the way of big ag, we might see ourselves in a little bit of a sticky situation here. So landraces and heirlooms, they have stable genetic foundations. They have a very unique cannabinoid and terpene profiles, full, true genetic expression, and huge medical potential and benefits. Why is that important? The genetic diversity is important because we need to realize the full medical potency and potential of cannabis for lots of ailments. And let's not really forget where a lot of these ailments are coming from. They're coming from the degradation of the nutrient value of our food, right? Our diets, we're eating more calories and we're getting fewer and fewer nutrients. And think about how that food is grown, and when you grow your cannabis, do you want to produce that same kind of output? So we're chasing supplements internally, right? I don't know how many supplements I take to try to, add on to my food, that I should be getting this out of nutrients to deal with my nutrient deficiencies. Luckily, cannabis is a brilliant plant for bringing homeostasis back to the body. And so the early land races and current craft medical cannabis grows have the advantage of connecting. And Henry referred to this. When you're in there with your plants, you're connecting endocannabinoid system to endocannabinoid system. This is an aptogenetic plant, which means it adapts to the person that's growing it. There's frequencies, all kinds of frequencies. So cannabinoid and terpene expression is very complex. It's a complex interplay of abiotic and biotic conditions as well as genetics. And so you bring this all together to get healthier plants for healthier patients. At the end of the day, that's what we care about, is making sure the patient is healthy and that the medicine they're taking, no matter what they're taking it for, is healthy for them. So if there's only one thing from my presentation that you walk away with, this is it. This is the bottom line message, is nature knows what to do. This is a picture from the old growth redwood forest of Humboldt County. It's a special place. When you walk in there, you know it, you feel it, and no one needs to fertilize those plants. The forest works in a symbiotic system of growth, death, decay, rebirth, feeding itself. It's cyclical, and it's a symbiotic relationship. Personally, I'm not sure. And, I thought it was great, the master grower comment. We're trying to bioengineer our way into cannabis or dial it in. Why are we doing that? Nature is the technology. She knows what to do. So let's bring these outdoor nature technologies into indoor environments. It's genius. It's really the way to go. All right, so plant science. How does nature dial it in? How do they do that? So the first aspect of this are the abiotic conditions. These are the non-living chemical, electrical, and physical parts of the environment that affect the living organisms and the functioning of the ecosystems. These abiotic factors underpin all of biology. They're extremely important. Then you've got the biotic, or the living conditions. And these are also very important because they enable the adaptive stress in the plant. And what this does is allows for maximum expression of your genetics. So you're achieving healthy plant immune systems, full genetic expression, and healing medicines. Okay, 2 facts for you. Fact number 1, plants thrive in sunlight. It's just a fact. And so do humans. I have a personal experience of moving from sunny San Diego, well, it's not so sunny today, normally it is, to Boston. And I really did suffer. I was used to living here, I was used to the sun. I didn't have sun anymore in the winter, and I suffered. So plant growth is influenced by this variety of the wavelengths of the lights of energy, its intensities, and the hours of sunlight. And remember, these wavelengths are packets of light energy, and they're directly proportional to frequency. Wavelength times frequency equals speed of light. So I'm going to mostly talk frequency, but they're directly proportional. These frequencies play a critical role in plant vegetation growth, plant reproductive or flowering. all these developmental stages, biomass development, secondary metabolite synthesis, et cetera, et cetera. Very, very important. And what we found by working with our grower partners is that without sunlight, plants are weaker, more expensive, and dirtier to grow. And when you grow it in a large commercial setting, you're going to see this happening. Fact number 2, living mediums. Living soil, living water, living mediums, very important. It's a whole primer. If you've never heard of this, please look up Jeff Lowenfels online. Check out one of his talks. He will walk you through it and the importance of it. Better yet, get a hold of Teaming with Microbes and really educate yourself on how important that is. At a high level, rather than following a traditional big ag approach of feeding the plant NPK, just pumping it directly in there, you create a living environment. This is the compost side of things that comes in. It goes back to that redwood forest. And this is what happens is these little microbes become the carriers for the plant. And the plant communicates with these microbes. It's extremely intelligent. And this system works. It works in nature. And the living soil or the living medium becomes the immune system of the plant, right? Think about our guts. That's a big part of our immune system for our bodies. The same is true for plants. And it's key. It's really key. If you want to create high quality cannabis, you should be having sun and living soil or a living medium. It creates a biodynamic exchange of energy and nutrients. Very, very important scientifically. Symbiosis. The name of the game. And if you don't do it, you have the high cost of not doing it. It's just like us chasing nutrients. It's the same thing. If I'm taking my vitamins and all of that, it's the same exact thing. Chasing the nutrients because the plant doesn't have it. Okay, let's talk about the science of the sun a little bit. And forgive me if I'm going, too elementary here. But in the industry, we hear about PAR. Visible light. Photosynthetic active radiation. It's a made-up term, people. As you can see here in a simplified view, an approximate percentage, visible light is only 44% of the sun's spectrum. Do you think plants don't use the rest of the spectrum? They do. They use it all the way from UV all the way out to infrared. And when you don't have that, you don't get the photoreceptors getting all of what they want. They absorb light at varying efficiencies across the full electromagnetic spectrum. And we're still learning how. Heck, we're learning how the human body works. We just heard about the endocannabinoid system not too long ago, right? So we're really learning. So maybe you've noticed if you give your plants the right frequencies, they dance a little bit. That's not made up. I see some people nodding their heads. Like they're actually enjoying that frequency. So more bioavailable energy means stronger connections between the plants and their growing medium and how they're growing. You also get all these other benefits, and you guys probably already read that already, so I won't go into it. Let's talk a little bit about why this is important. So cannabis has something like 400 plus compounds. I've heard numbers 400 to 1,100. We haven't even discovered all of them. But if you think about wavelengths or frequencies, like I'll give you an analogy, like major nutrient groups for people, fat, protein, minerals, fiber, etc. We need all of these and more to stay in balance. And our bodies use them for different purposes. But without a complete nutritional diet, we miss a key process. That's absorption. So for instance, if I want to absorb vitamin D and calcium, I need magnesium in my body, right? So we've got to have this system. So this helps us understand the role of frequencies. If we look at this graphic, the y-axis is absorption, and the x-axis is wavelength, or also frequency. And this is showing it's showing UV, some UV, but it's not showing, infrared. It's stopping at the end of the visible light spectrum. So something like 50-55% of the spectrum. But you can see that chlorophyll A absorbs here in blue, and then, whoa, it's got a peak out here in red. And then chlorophyll B, or the carotenes, like the beta carotenes, absorb, this yellow one, absorb here in the blues and the greens. And then you've got the different, I try to pronounce these, Thank you, whoever just said it. I'm up on stage, so I can't even say that right now. But they're absorbing here in the yellows and the greens across. And what's really important to note about this is it's across frequencies, right? It's not just one frequency causing this. It's across frequencies. Imagine if we were able to map the 400 plus compounds in cannabis. That thing would be covered, and it would be across all the frequencies. So let's talk a little bit about lights. And this is, this might be controversial here, but it's science. Again, this graph, and I love this paper, by the way, but, the research right now is being done predominantly in the PAR range. So we're not even seeing what's happening beyond PAR, right? And so what you can see here is different types of lights. This is a fluorescent light. And it's actually got a pretty nice spectrum here. It's got a few peaks. It goes a little bit into UV, but it doesn't have the power to really grow your plants. HPS, yep, indoor. It's bringing street lights indoor. We know why they did it. It's a powerful light. They were underground. It made sense at the time. Doesn't make sense today. It's about 21% of the sun spectrum, 21 to 23% of the sun spectrum. So here's sun back here. Now let's look at LEDs, and please forgive me, but I'm going to be a little controversial here. This graph represents several types of LEDs. And look, I come from energy efficiency, so I was all about LEDs until I learned how plants grow. And then I realized they actually need more than LEDs. So a green LED is generating at a wavelength of 550 nanometers, one frequency. Now, when they draw it for you, it looks like it actually goes across a lot of frequencies, but it doesn't. It's normalized. A red is somewhere around 633 nanometers, and a blue is about 470 nanometers. So what happens when you want to create an LED, you combine these different point frequencies. Like there's no quarter wavelength, there's no half wavelength, there's nothing, it's one wavelength. And they combine them together, and then they say, hey, we've got full spectrum, and we added in UV. There's no uniformity across it, and it's only at individual spectrums. Why is this important? Think about an orchestra. If you paid money to go to an orchestra, and the tuba, the triangle, and the trumpet played, would you feel satisfied? You need all of the instruments and all of the frequencies together to really enjoy that orchestra. So that's kind of how, just at a really high level, and we could talk about this for hours, and phosphorus and all the things around lights. We would be happy to dig in more about this, about the science. But I'll just conclude this slide by saying it's not enough. The plants need sun. Why? So let's talk about some of the processes. So when a plant or when a human is exposed to UVB, like me, I'm fairly fair-skinned, I don't produce a lot of melanin, I tend to burn. That's what's going on with plants. When they get UVB in isolation, and you just throw a UVB light in there, or just a UV light, then you're not getting the ability for the plant to adapt to that, because how it adapts to it and heals from it is with the UVA and the blue. And so this creates a stronger immune system for the plant. It, by the way, also creates a ton more terpenes and cannabinoids in your trichome. So that's a pretty exciting result of it as well. Green light. Oh my gosh, the science of this is so interesting. We had these major misconceptions from some science from the 70s that plants, they don't use green light. They just reflect it. Absolutely not true. You can even read about this on all the LED websites. What happens is green improves the quantum yield. What is that? That's just a fancy way of saying that the ratio of the number of photons emitted to the number of photons absorbed. So it's able to absorb a lot more of the photons. And this is, it also stimulates unique photoreceptors like anthocyanin and others. And so you see photosynthesis a lot deeper in the leaves, and it's absorbed deeper in the canopy in the shade, right? So when your leaves are shading down deep, you get more penetration. We're starting to even think that it activates the living soil and the microbes. They're catching these frequencies and activating and being more active. I guess I use that word a lot. And then the thing I'm starting to research is, can you get better sativa growth because of this? Because remember, the sativas are like sun-loving plants, and so that green enables them to grow. It's really hard to grow a pure sativa indoors. So what about infrared? This one's my favorite because we don't ever talk about it. In fact, a lot of times people come to us and say, oh no, infrared's completely wasted energy. Not true. There are lots of phytochromes that, these are pigments that are sensitive to infrared, that do use infrared in plants. And what happens is it regulates their circadian rhythms. They're starting to do studies. If you think about people that are under blue light all the time, they're getting sicker, they don't feel as well. Big reason for that is it messes with your circadian rhythm and you don't get enough sleep. Well, your plants sleep too, right? And they actually do most of their growth at night when all that energy they absorb during the day is being, partitioned out to the plant. So really, really important for your plants to sleep. And so some of our growing partners said, well, we love infrared because the plants go to sleep up to an hour earlier, so we get an hour more growth out of our plant, which shortens our veg cycle, which shortens our flower cycle, and we're super happy with that. If you want to get even more technical, the infrared wakes up the birds early in the morning before the sunlight, the visible light, comes through, and then the birds are in charge of waking up the plants. But that's a whole nother, we could talk more about that. It's fun stuff. But for sun-loving plants like cannabis, IR gets you compact structure, faster flowering, increased pathogen and metabolite defenses, so better immune systems. And we think that's really important. So just to kind of sort of wrap this all up, when you bring sunlight, it strengthens the plant and food soil web connections, improves your nutrient fixation, extremely important, your plant immune systems, your uptake of CO2, you get faster growth, you get higher cannabinoid and terpene profiles. And so why is this? It's because it's controlled by a really complex interplay. If we try to dial it in, we don't know how one thing that we're taking away affects another thing. We just don't know. It's about so much more than CBD and THC. To get the full benefit of medicine and the full expression of any plant, it's important to provide the plant with a system that includes all of the abiotic and biotic conditions that it's used to. Genetics are an important part. They're only one piece. And if we want to protect this plant that has healed many of us, I'm sure you're here today because you've experienced that, and we don't want to go the same route as bananas and chocolate, such as, oh, please forgive me if I offend anyone, OG this, OG that, Blue Dream this, Blue Dream that. If we want to actually have full expression, heirloom and landrace strains, we've got to go back to how nature does it. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about our technology and why we are seeing such great results. And so this is Cultivation 4.0. Here it is, right here, it's now. We've been doing this for 5 years, and now we're going mainstream. We've tested, because we don't want to do anything that would anyway adversely impact patients. Extremely important to us. This technology was developed as a solar simulator. And what does that mean? We were testing solar cells specifically to know if solar cells worked. So it had to be exactly like the sun. I mean, exactly. And gosh, we were looking at it and we studied more and more about food and cannabis and began to understand without the sun, plants are dirtier and more expensive to grow. And inefficient, by the way, when you bring them indoors. But yeah, it's true. You have a controlled environment, you have consistency. So how can we do this indoors? Well, we do it this way. This is what the sun on demand looks like. This yellow line, and see all the little, this is what I'm talking about, all the little data points. It's really complicated what the sun is emitting. There's tons of wavelengths, quarter wavelengths, 16 wavelengths. All of that is coming off of the sun. And this is on June 21st in Geneva, Switzerland, the yellow line. We're going all the way from UVB. We took out UVC because it's a tiny little wavelength. It is harmful. And you can get a suntan under this light. All the way out to far infrared. Keep in mind the sun goes out to 1 million nanometers, right? So when you stop at par, 700 nanometers, the sun goes out to 1,000,000. It's quite a big difference. So this literally is the sun. What results are we seeing? So having been a cannabis patient myself for many years, and starting to understand that my autoimmune deficiency was caused by glyphosate, actually, is what the research is starting to show. And I know in an instant when I have anything with glyphosate in it, so pesticides, Roundup, and our artificial food supply. We were especially interested in clean, sustainable growing for very clean plants. And so we realized bringing the sun indoors does that. So these photos are not unique to our results. All of our photos look like this. This is an indoor grow. The grower's name is Hawk Marsden. He's from UCANA2. And Hawk puts this light to the test. He puts plants infected with powdery mildew. He puts plants that are ready to die under this light. And without a doubt, he says the number one benefit is healing. And then higher vegetation, higher flowers. So the trichome development is amazing. And speaking of that, you can see that here. These are the leaves. And this is a royal flush. It's a heirloom strain from a Mexican landrace. And you can see the trichomes on here all the way throughout. What does this mean? It means a lot higher development of all the cannabinoids and all the terpenes in the plant. Nate here is holding, what is he holding? Oh, 2 branches of Molokai frost. And this is a Hawaiian heirloom strain from a landrace. And this is not unique. Every single one of our branches look like that. The flowers develop all the way down, and they have massive trichome development. So I think we're getting close to time. Do we have a couple minutes for questions, or? We do. Okay. So if you want to reach out, here's all my information, or just come talk to us. We're all about educating. We're not a lighting company. We do have a lighting technology. We're a sustainability and wellness company, and we only care about creating the best medicine. And I think science and learning is going to be the way we get there, right? And sharing. So tell us what you've learned. We want to know. So I will stop there for questions. Yeah. Oh, wait. There's the microphone.
I was just wondering if you could expand on the healing properties of the light when you're saying powdery mildew was put under it and other things like that. How did the light or the spectrum itself help cure these plants?
Yeah, so, I mean, we don't fully know completely how, but some of the processes that we talked about, the photoreactivation, building up the immune system, all of that seem to be healing the plant. I wish I could tell you, but that plant just knows what to do. And so the differences in the humidity of the rooms, they don't happen as much because the lights are very, very efficient. They're twice as efficient as LEDs. So you don't have that heat output, so you don't get those big changes in humidity. So that may be one reason, which I just learned from your talk. It's also the UV. We know that the UV kills off a lot of things like powdery mildew and mold and things like that. But I don't know that we could completely tell you why. We just know that it does.
How many tests have you done like that? Do you know?
Oh, we've been testing it for over 5 years. Yeah. So we're just going mainstream now. Yeah, we're in the middle of a raise, and you can imagine, And I think everything has a role. So I don't want to downplay LED's role in this industry. If you want to do large commercial grows, maybe that's the way you go. But there we go. Ooh, someone had a lot of Wi-Fi on them. Maybe, but this is cheaper, more cost-effective, and you get healthier plants and faster growth. So I would just bypass that altogether. Right here, question?
Hi, I'm just a little confused as to the product that you either help sell or support or find that, and how it works to provide a full spectrum of light compared to everything else that's out there. I don't understand the technology.
Yeah, I can talk about the technology a little bit. If you're interested in seeing it, I have it in my room. I can light it up for you. I mean, it literally lights. It's the footprint of it is about 144 square feet, anywhere between 100 for 1,100 watts. So it's a plasma technology. So there are plasma lights out there, but this one's much different than what's out there on the market today. It's 1,100 watts. We have some noble metals inside a quartz crystal vacuum bulb. And then we take a magnetic field and we excite those noble metals, and they go from solid, liquid to gas up to the fourth state of matter, plasma. And then it just once those ions are bombarding each other like crazy in this little vacuum bulb, it's about the size of a golf ball, a little bit smaller. Once they hit the quartz, they cool instantly, and they're emitted as photons, and they go everywhere. I don't have it open right now, but certainly we could show you some photos of it and or show it to you in person. It's outstanding. We can literally take it and with a reflector shoot it a mile. You can see that light for like a mile. You can't imagine. If you go on our Instagram, you can see some photos of we're lighting up a tree that's 5 stories tall. And by the way, it woke up the birds. They came out of the tree, they were flying around, and we didn't get it at first. And then we realized later, oh, IR, the infrared tells the birds it's daylight. So, we have a manufacturing partner, and we're just bringing it to cannabis and food, just because we care about quality. Yeah.
I guess I just wanted to know, like, how long the bulbs would last, and what is the footprint of the light you're saying?
Yeah, the footprint is between 100 and 144 square feet, so anywhere from 10 by 10 to 12 by 12 for cannabis. For other foods, it's a lot bigger. And the first question, I'm sorry. Oh, so the bulb, we don't actually know. We have one that's been running for 6.5 years, nonstop. We say 100,000 hours for the bulb itself. The magnetron component, the manufacturer guarantees that for 40,000 hours. We have one again that's been running more hours than that. So we don't really know. We're still learning that. Yeah, but it's significantly longer than HID or LED. Yeah.
Is the intensity adjustable?
You can dim it. Yeah, it's a dimmable to about 50%. But we literally, you can seed all the way to mothers under it. We've never adjusted the intensity. We just do it. And then you can plant those. So we mostly support outdoor farmers, which might seem strange, but we mostly do because we believe in growing in nature. And so you can literally take your clones and put them right outdoors without all that shock of adjusting to the sun because they're already grown under the sun.
I have 2 totally different questions. One is, what's the approximate cost of the light? And the second is, can you grow in desert land outdoors with the right soil enrichment?
Oh, okay. So first question was, what is the cost of the light? So it's $6,000, but remember, guys, it's 100 to 144 square feet. It's more cost effective than any other system out there. We do side-by-sides. Can you grow anything outdoors in the desert? Is that your question? Hemp or cannabis? Depends on your soil, for sure. I mean, hemp is a very adaptable plant, but it still needs some living, something down there to grow it. So if you're growing in sand, desert sand, I think you're gonna have a lot of challenges. But we have seen some growers doing it, but they're mending the soils a lot. Yeah.
Can you comment a little bit more on, you said the green spectrum and it increasing either the population of microbial activity in the root biomass or just, in general? They must be kicking in the secondary metabolites and helping the mobility of nutrients and whatnot.
So first thing I'll say about green is we are still learning. So I can comment on what I know, and it's, we're still learning. But This green seems to penetrate very deep into the canopy, and it seems to activate. I don't know that it increases the number of microbes, but it seems to activate that microbial structure, and so that they, I don't know, they communicate more with the plant. In terms of, it also, you can put too much green and get what's called shade avoidance syndrome. So if you're just putting green in there, you can cause some problems. So that's why, again, we advocate for full frequencies, all the frequencies. But I'm happy to do more research and get back to you.
Because they speed up the metabolic processes, and then you've got more exudates that they've got to communicate with the bacteria. Because I mean, a lot of it seems to kind of integrate.
Yeah, it kind of goes together. I don't know that I could give, I don't want to guess at that,
Sure.
but I could do some more research on that for you, for sure.